Well, thank you all so much for being here. I want to thank Crystal and Michelle and Laurie for being here and being willing to share your thoughts about the Common Read. We're all very excited about this project, and we're really grateful for you all joining us and learning more about what we're doing here. So again, thank you all so much. And if y'all want to take it away, that sounds good to me.
Well, I mean, I can always talk, Katie, you know that. I'm happy to kick it off. So the Common Read and Academic Connections houses our first year experience programming. And we have always known that a Common Read is a best practice, a high impact practice. And it's just taken a really long time. And it really took someone like Katie Stewart and the people on our subcommittee to really move forward with it because, I mean, let's face it, we all have a lot on our plates. So we really needed someone to sort of just run with it. And Katie has done that. And as well as, yes, she has really been an ambassador. So I guess I can just give you the history. So the library committee, I don't know, the library advisory committee maybe 3 years ago, Lynn, has this been like a 3 to 5 year too? Talked about creating a common read, and we had some issues, I think, with the book that we chose, that it was a little bit too much for what the college thought we should do. And then we formed a subcommittee last year. And Katie took leadership on that. And we read 3 books. We read With the Fire on High. We read The Hate That You Give. And then we read a Baldwin book. And I always get the name wrong. But in terms of content, thematic possibilities, as well as readability, we all really loved With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, because we feel like there are a lot of places that we can go with the book. And I'll let the other panelists talk about this. We plan in our freshman seminar courses to include discussions and journals that relate to the pacing guide that our English classes have, that we'll set up. I know that Lynn and Bonnie are on board with integrating it into their classes, and we're hoping to bring more people on board so that we can really have a common read where students are reading and talking about this book in all of their classes. It also helps with creating connections between classes as well, where they see how content, fits, that they're not just having what Connie Staley calls college in a box. So we are super excited about this. Katie, you don't know this yet, but we have our first small portion of funds to have and I'll talk to you about this later. We're trying to sort of cobble together funds to have Elizabeth Acevedo come to campus next spring. And we have our first little dent in the very large requirement for her speaking fee. But we think it's really important to do that, especially our first year, and hopefully it's something that we can continue. So I'll stop talking and hand it off to another panelist. Lynn, do you want to pass the baton to you?
Sure. We tried to choose a book that would have many different approaches to it in hopes that we can indeed get people across campus to find something in the book that they can incorporate into their classes. So This book it's just got great material about the relationships between the characters, what the characters go through. I see so many parallels to our students in this book, even though it's a young adult book and the characters are in high school. I see so much about our students in this book, and I just, the committee is just so excited, and we just want to put our excitement on everybody else and get everybody to buy in, and let's really make this successful. So I don't know what else I'm supposed to say.
Michelle, do you want to hop in?
Sure, I can jump in. So I came into the Library Advisory Committee while this was already in process. The Common Read Subcommittee had not yet been chosen and hadn't started meeting yet. But I also participated in the read of the books when we decided which book we were going to do. I'd already read With the Fire on High and absolutely adored it. As Lynn said, there are so many themes in this book that our students can relate to. First generation college students, multiracial families, single mothers, problems or challenges with co-parenting a child when the other parent is not your spouse. Trying to figure out who you are. Are you the personality of the family that you've come from, or are you going to reach beyond where they've ever gone, either professionally or academically, etc. So there's so much here to work with. So to support this book, as ever, I created a research guide. So I can share that. I can share my screen. I think I can share my screen very briefly, just to show y'all what's there so far. Let's try. Yes, it's letting me. Okay. All right, come on, friend. Okie dokie. Can y'all see the research guide? Can someone tell me verbally yes or no if you can see the research guide, please?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't see any responses when I'm showing all this. So, okay. So here's what I've put together so far. So we have interviews with the author, videos of interviews with the author, organizations for professional women, because Imani is an aspiring chef. So we wanted to have that professional representation. Some cultural information. So Imani is African-American and Latinx. So there are a number of articles and sources here about Afro-Latinx culture. And this is what we have so far. What we also want to do here is add some teaching resources. So if you are thinking about using this in your courses, you can consult resources that other instructors have found helpful. And of course, as you're tripping across the web, if you notice anything else additional that you'd like added to this guide, please just let me know, because we want this to kind of be a holistic source for this whole effort. So stop sharing my screen. And then finally, the Library Book Club is having an online discussion about With the Fire on High on Thursday, October 28th at 7 p.m. That is on the college's calendar. It is also on the events calendar on the library's homepage. You do not need to be a member of the book club to attend. We really want this to be a lively, kind of casual discussion. Outside of the classroom. You can talk about what you've learned, you can talk about what you've covered, you can talk about questions that you might have about the theme or the characters. But we kind of wanted to make this more of a casual, fun event for anyone who wanted to drop in. And if there's ever anything else the library can do to support this effort, please just let us know. So
Thank you, Michelle.
You're
Laurie,
welcome.
do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with the Common Read so far?
I am the new kid on the block here, so I'm just kind of all starry-eyed and like, oh, this is so cool. And as I get into it, my mind goes so many different places. Like last night we stayed up way too late. We got HBO Max and watched Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights, about Hispanic and Latinx culture in Washington Heights in New York. And it's so similar to the protagonist is in Philadelphia, but there's so, and her family's from Puerto Rico. There's all this Boricua culture and identity and pride issues. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I could show this clip from In the Heights and we could talk about this and we could just go on this, but I go off on that tangent with it. And then, I mean, I put on my mom hat, and I'm a mom of 2 high schoolers. And I think about just some of the issues going on in the book as a mom of teenagers, and things like the consent issue, and the fact that the character is living in a world where no one ever talked to her, educated her about consent. And so I wonder, can we get Julie Valentine involved? Because I know all my students, if they're parents, they're having the, middle-aged white privileged moms are struggling to talk about, who go to workshops. We have trouble with these things. My students who are parents, or my students who are dealing with it themselves, there's so much that could come up from this book. I was in the bathroom at Berry College. They had a wonderful poster about consent up, and just really educational. And I was like trying to get out my camera and take a picture of it without anybody thinking it was weird that I had my camera out in a bathroom. So just all these different tangents that can go off of it. I think it could really, I would love to, to really get interdisciplinary. Even when you say that, Crystal, I've had friends who helped bring Jacqueline Woodson to Greenville a few years ago, and was a very community-based, and I'm not sure where they got their grant money, but there are different ways to get, as a lot of ways to get community involvement there. But putting my teacher hat on, teaching reading, developmental reading and developmental writing, I think we're at such a good point and a good time for this. Again, this also my mom having watched high schoolers try to do English classes with Zoom and not being in class as often, physically in the same room, talking about things as often, not able to, just so much and more instructional time this year for kids was, and for students was, mechanics and logistics, not so much really diving deep as much as I wanted. I mean, that's what I was dealing with. And then I hear more and more talk about Spark Notes and things. And just the fact that I think we have the concern that, are they going to get so bored of this with this book if we are doing it in the reading classes, the writing classes, the college skills, the English 101. However, I think it's a really good opportunity for our students to experience a deep dive into a piece of literature from many different angles, over and over again. Maybe you skipped this assignment reading it for this class and you winged it with Spark Notes today, but maybe you get a second chance at that part for this other class this other time. And by the end of a semester or a year, you may come out with a richer understanding of this one work than you have had before. And that may teach students what it's like to dive deep, and also that it's rewarding to really know a piece of literature well. So that's where all the thoughts off the top of my head right now, starry-eyed.
Thank you so much, Laurie. Does anybody have any questions or anything you want to bring up as far as thoughts you have about whether that's thinking about using the Common Read in your own classes, or how it's going to work kind of across the college? Anybody have any thoughts they want to share or questions to ask our panelists?
Actually, I would like to ask a question of Lynn and Bonnie, because they are CTE instructors. And since we're looking at possibly having some Perkins involved, how do you all, I understand how this will work with the general education courses, the reading, the English, the COL concentration, but how would you all think might be used in your human services courses relating to your subject matter? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but that's what keeps coming to mind as I'm listening.
I teach a diversity issues and human service practice course. So it's perfect for the diversity issues class that I teach. Currently, the way I have it set up is that we begin with the issue of race, and then we focus on intersectionality. So we begin with race. This is my intersectionality hand gesture.
Gotcha.
So we begin with race, and then we add on other issues. We add on income or socioeconomic class. We add on the immigration issue. We add on gender and sexuality. We add on immigration status. There's something else that I've forgotten. So we're adding on these other concepts. And I think if we start with the book, then when we add, and then addressing the issue of race and racism, we can then add on the other issues that are addressed in the book. So I think it's just another common jumping off point for discussions.
So it sounds like you might be requiring it as a read in that class. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's where I'm kind of going with.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with right now.
Okay.
Just to go back to the background, you reminded me, Dr. Smith, about some of the discussions we had. It was very important to us as a committee because when we first started talking about it, we were in the midst of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. And we talked about a lot of different books. And one of the things that we decided was important to us is to have a narrative, because sometimes to have a narrative and a story where you're talking about the characters in the story rather than the issues that can divide us, right? We thought that this was a really gentle, as much as these discussions can be gentle, a less provocative way to talk about these issues with our students. I think, Bonnie and Lynn can do a deeper dive, as Lori was saying, because they have human services students. But in our gen ed classes, we wanted our faculty to be comfortable to talk about race and gender and LGBTQ+ and those issues as they relate to characters in the book, rather than taking those concepts head on. So I think this is a great book for that.
And then just to piggyback on that, Gina Maria, I'm using it in HUS 225, which has a really long, boring name, but we refer to it as the resilience class in our program. And so the students would be reading this book, and doing the written assignment would be a paper on how any of the characters in the book demonstrate resilience. It's multi-generational, the book, which, by the way, in case everybody hasn't seen it, here it is. That's what it looks like. So the main character, Amoni, as Michelle mentioned, but her grandmother her father raised her and is helping to raise Amoni's baby, right? And so we have students who are raising grandchildren. So that character is resilient. Amoni is resilient. Some of her peers also demonstrate resilience. So that assignment to me is perfect with the book. But the conversations in class certainly are going to focus on relationships among the people in the book. Human services, right? We're all about relationships and, family systems, all that stuff. And all of that is in this book. How the different characters, how do they negotiate their own doubts? I mean, they're looking at in the start of the book, the characters are trying to figure out what colleges they want to go to and how to write college essays. and the students that come to Greenville Tech haven't had to write college essays, right? Because we have an open policy, but we do need them to know, if they're going on to other colleges, and just, the self-doubt that they can do it. I hear it in our assignments a lot, that our students have self-doubt, that people in their family, unfortunately, have instilled doubt that they can be successful at college. And certainly we as professors are constantly trying to cheerlead them through that. And to see it in a book with other characters who are struggling with that, I mean, I just feel like it could be a deep conversation in any class, not even human services, just you're here and we believe in you and you can do this, and that self-doubt is not uncommon, when you're coming up against hard things. So, we will be having multiple conversations in the classroom, but the written assignment is specifically on resilience. How do the characters demonstrate resilience in this book? If that answers your question, Jeanna Marie.
It does. Because I've been talking with Katie and Crystal, but hearing from you all from the instructional standpoint and how you'll use it in the classroom will really help me as I'm writing this as part of the proposal. So that was great information. Thanks, Bonnie, for letting me know about the electives.
I was just wondering, from those who've already piloted it in your classes, the COL and the English, and I don't know who else has piloted, how did you all use it? What are some things that you had the students do? And what were their reactions to the book? I'm really curious.
I'll be happy to answer that. And Crystal, feel free to jump in as well. I piloted it in English 101 in the spring, and used it as a basis for, they did have several reading quizzes. I used it as a basis for discussion boards. And then it was also kind of a thematic springboard for their essays. So, so for the research essays for English 101, I'm always trying to figure out, how do I help these students, do something that they can relate to, but then allows them to, figure out how to do academic research and use the library databases. So I have 2 research essays. So for one of them, I had them research a famous chef and identify ways that that particular chef has been influential in their world, right? So whether that's, a particular sort of style of cuisine, or and I got a wide range. I mean, I got students writing about, Food Network personalities, but I also got students writing about, people that are well known for a particular restaurant. It was really cool. And then for the third essay, which is the second research essay, I had them do comparison and contrast, and they had to research the cuisine of 2 different countries and compare and contrast them, because that's kind of a big part with the Fire on High, is she's sort of interacting with, lots of different styles of cuisine from, there's a component of her family being from Puerto Rico. And then also she takes a trip to Spain. And so Spanish cuisine is kind of a big part of the story as well. And my students really liked doing that. It seemed to make sense to them in terms of doing the research. And so that was kind of mostly how I used it academically. It was an online class, so we did have a few discussions in our live sessions, but in a face-to-face class, I would definitely want to use it for more of a basis for in-class discussions. But I will say, at the end of the term, I asked the students to just submit a little paragraph about how they responded to the book and what they liked about it, how they connected with it. And I honestly was so pleased with their responses. I have a little Word document that I can read from some of these students, and these aren't everything that everybody shared, but you know, one student said, to be honest, I'm not really much of a reader. If I were being honest, I've only read a few books. The majority of them were some I was required to read and didn't enjoy them at all. But this book, however, was different. Another student said, you know, when it comes to me and reading books, it takes a lot for me to really get into it. While I was reading With the Fire on High, I quickly became hooked on it. The story was just so interesting to me. At times, I found it hard to put the book down at work. And then a lot of the students talked about how relatable they found Imani and her story, and how she was motivating to them. So one student said, one of the things that I learned from the book is not to let other things get in the way of reaching your goals. I tend to get discouraged rather easily. And after reading this book and seeing how Imani let nothing hold her back, I want to be more like her. Another student said, I adored this book. It's exactly the kind of book I would read on my own time. Something I really liked was the way that the book represented Imani's struggle to make a decision about college, because that's something I can really relate to. It felt very realistic. She struggled with financial issues, grades, personal life choices. The narrative of the book felt very personal, as though seeing it through Imani's eyes. Just one other, this student says, I enjoyed reading With the Fire on High. It has influenced me in many ways during my semester at GTC. I gained insight on how I view myself and judgment that I have unknowingly placed on others as a student and personally. I found that I was most relatable with Imani, both academically and personally, since I also had a child young and faced many trials on both journeys, school and personally. I would most definitely recommend this book to another student, and even those who aren't in school. So just really positive responses. And I think the students did find it relatable, and in different ways. One student wrote about how the fact that it highlighted culinary arts was something that he loved because he loves food. And I thought that was great. And so I just, I was really, I mean, I sort of, from the perspective of someone being a part of the selection process, I thought that would be their response. I hoped that would be their response. I don't think we would have selected it if we hadn't anticipated that. But to hear it from actual, you know, real life students was really encouraging. And these are students, you know, English 101, right out the gate in a pandemic, dealing with everything. And they read it and they liked it. So, Crystal, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about your pilot.
Katie and I had tried to do sort of a learning community, but that didn't pan out. That's just really hard to connect those. But one of my students said, oh, yeah, I love this book. I know someone just like her. I will say, and this really falls on me because I feel like because they weren't reading it in their other classes, and I really wasn't really giving them reading quizzes and things like that. I'm not sure how much they really dove into the book, but there were a couple of guys in the class who said, why can't we read a book about sports? So I think that that's just going to be up to me and other instructors to engage, you know, sort of the, is machismo the right word? I don't know. And talking about ideas about fathering and parenthood and consent. So that was the only negative comment I had. But you know, when you that's what happens when you have a common read. You really aren't going to please everyone. But I think if they read it and these discussions come out, they'll see how it is relatable. So yeah, did you guys see that at all?
I was just going to jump in saying reading it at, because I have a son and was reading it. And you always have, if you pick a book that relates, well, I even had one time taught an Amy Tan book and found some of the guys in there saying, oh, I could relate to this because I was in Korea with the army, or I can relate to this because I'm from Australia and I was raised in Berea or whatever. So yeah, I think you can find the connections. And I think one thing that helps with that is that Tyrone, Imani's baby's dad, is such a relatable character in a lot of ways. He's an involved dad who's concerned, but he doesn't know he's figuring out this co-parenting thing the way that Imani is. And I don't know, I just think that there are things to hook on with there. The whole fact of the book is relatable, but it's elsewhere. It's in Philadelphia. Maybe sometimes it helps that it's not set in the South. I even found that like teaching Cry the Beloved Country like 2 decades ago, teaching Cry the Beloved Country gave my students a safe place to talk about race because it was about them and not about us. And I'm hoping this book can do the same a little bit by being about Northerners doing this stuff. So anyway, some random thoughts, but yeah, that it is definitely a chick lit book in some ways, but it doesn't have to be.
I had
Yep.
one comment from a male student who said that the book gave him insight into his mother because she was a young single mom, and he said it helped him understand her better. And I was really touched by that. I thought that was really kind of sweet. Just a nice point of connection there. Mary, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk about your students' experience with the book.
Sure. I used it in my RWR English Plus class, and it was mostly guys in the class. It was a small class, but mostly guys. One student just didn't find it interesting, but he didn't read anything all term, so it was kind of par for the course. But the other guys thought it was interesting. They talked a lot about fatherhood, the different fathers in the book, and they were interested in the fact that she was a hands-on learner. That really resonated with them. So it was really well received, and we used it very thoroughly throughout the whole term. We used it for discussion boards, reflections, and I used the journal feature in Blackboard. We used it for reading skills like inference and context. So it was a great experience, and it's so rich and thematically that it was very easy to find something to talk about or something to write about. That was never a struggle at all. And we did a couple of research projects. They did a vocabulary project where they picked words from the book and made PowerPoints and taught their fellow classmates. And they did a research project on Spain that was a PowerPoint and presented it to their classmates.
I have a question for one of our participants. Sorry, Kirsten. I know you're probably here as a faculty member because you also teach, but do you see any implications for advising in any way? We kind of want it to be a campus-wide read. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, no, that was going to be my question. I was just waiting for a way to segue into that. I read it because I'm just interested. I love reading books, and it sounded so interesting when Katie presented it at one of the success checks. So I read it on my own, and I could see how, the role of the homeroom teacher who helped her figure out what her dreams were and then guided her in that direction, how that can pertain to advising. And I was going to ask you guys, the panel, like, how do you see us, the advising team here on Barton campus, or even in the satellite campuses, pulling in the Common Read into what we do? Or is it just something that maybe we as advisors need to read to be mindful of some of those things? What do y'all think? I'm gonna throw it back at you, Crystal.
One of the things we talked about in our class is that her homeroom teacher wanted so much to be helpful, but there were times when Amani was saying she doesn't get it, like she doesn't understand. And that was interesting to talk about the times when the teachers or advisors just don't quite get the whole background of what the student's struggling with.
Absolutely. Sometimes there is a disconnect, right? And there shouldn't be, especially with advising.
I'm wondering if this can't be integrated into the advising training academy in the fall in some way.
Oh, that's a
Kirsten?
good idea. Yes. Make all the advisors do a research project.
Or at least have it as a springboard for discussion about the very things that you and Mary were talking about, you know, since
Absolutely.
you are talking about appreciative advising a lot and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just a
Exactly.
thought.
Well, it opens your eyes though to some of the issues, because even though we might have more detailed conversations with some of our students, we don't always know what's going on in their lives. And an advisor might have more of a personal connection to a student than an instructor. I don't know if that's always the case, but I think, you know, because we do this all the time and we ask those questions all the time, and we have more time built in for our students when we meet with them, that we might be able to navigate those conversations a little bit better. Or I don't know, maybe that's just the way I look at it, but I don't know if all of us have that ability or even the time to do that. But I think just reading this book and being aware of some of those issues more so than might be helpful. So yeah, I could see that. I could talk to Renee about maybe including it, and then having someone from the panel or a couple of people maybe facilitate that training session at the academy. That would be good. But are there any other ideas on how we could use the Common Read in our advising efforts?
I definitely think it's a good, you know, topic of conversation with students, especially, and I'm not sure, I know with the, you know, I guess with the Right Start advising model, you all will still be interacting with, you know, those students who are very early on in their sort of academic journey. But I wonder if that is something, if you're interacting with a student who is in their first semester or is just about to finish, and, you know, you can pretty much make the assumption if they're taking a COL 105 or English 101 or 100 level transitional reading or writing, that they have read it or they've been supposed to read it. And so it might be nice to have some talking points or some ways, you know, some questions that, you know, you all might be able to come up with that would sort of perhaps segue into, you know, things about their real life. You know, what did they find relatable about the book? Were there any challenges that you saw yourself in, or, you know, things like that? Or even if quite the opposite, no, you know, I'm not a hands-on learner, I'm very cerebral, I don't want to, you know, no interest in culinary arts whatsoever, you know, whatever the case may be. Even that kind of even if it's the opposite, I think it can lend some insight.
Right.
I do have a question that this kind of segues into. As I'm looking at all of you all, because I know your different areas and where you teach and various committees and stuff you serve on, from a individual professional development as instructors, as staff, did you feel like this benefited you on a personal level in your own personal development that you could then apply back into the classroom or into your position, not just the advisors, but back into just your everyday conversations with a student? And again, I'm thinking about how the grant requires things to be tied. And we've been talking about the student aspect, but I'm hearing a lot of growth and development opportunities for faculty and staff to personally enhance, especially with what Reggie was saying, personally enhance your own professional development. Am I on track thinking that?
Gina, I can speak to this because in our COL classes, we have a section on health and wellness, counseling, and we have written our own textbook and curriculum. And we had counseling come in to sort of help us with some of our faculty call it the sex, drugs, and rock and roll chapter. And this might be thing that Bonnie and Lynn can kind of help us with to be our consultants on this too. One of the things that I find is we have varying degrees of comfort levels with talking about consent. I had even brought up, do we need a trigger warning? Because for me on a personal level, you know, the section where she is, where she has her first sexual encounter, was so raw to me. And I think one of the things that I would like to see, and it's not just about sexuality. A lot of our faculty members aren't comfortable having discussions about race. Some of our faculty members are afraid to broach the topic because they don't know how to moderate it or facilitate it. And even about gender, about LGBTQ plus, I think in our hearts, we want to have these discussions because we want to be open and we want to show our humanity, but we have a lot of fear about that because we don't know where that will go and if we'll be able to handle where it goes. And I think some of you are more comfortable with that than others. So I think one of the things we had talked about is to have a PD on how to have difficult conversations so that people are more comfortable with having those. So that's just one way. That's personally something that I took from the book, is I know instructors who want to talk about these issues but aren't comfortable with it.
I think it's with this book especially, it's helpful to have, you know, the text can serve as a really helpful proxy, you know, because you can talk about these questions and issues as they come up, but it can be centered on a character in the text. And then, you know, someone in the class who may have that identity or have that life experience doesn't necessarily feel singled out. And, you know, the students can talk about, you know, Imani's experience or Malachi's experience, or, you know, the narrative in between when, you know, the author is writing things. And it just doesn't, it's a proxy for the conversation. It doesn't have to make anyone feel like a finger is being pointed at them or a spotlight on them, unless they want to volunteer that and share their own experience.
And I've found in things like that too, it's so rewarding when the allies speak first and the burden is not on the African-American student, the Latina, the queer student to be the one bringing it up, that really fosters great conversations.
Yeah, and definitely I got personally took a lot out of this book, Professional Development, Gina Marie, to get back to you. I mean, you know, for example, the students come into the cooking class, and Moni comes into a cooking class and she's like, you know, she's been cooking since she was 4. So she knows the kitchen, she knows everything, right? And then the chef in charge of the class essentially has to dismantle what they already know and help them use those skills in a way that are professional and are accepted in that profession. And we do that in human services. Our students come in saying, all my friends come to me for help. I'm the helper in my family. Well, let's look at what help means, and we need to dismantle that and let you use your skills in a way that's professional with boundaries in the best way possible. I mean, it was such a great reminder to me, and seeing that chef character, how he interacted with his students, and that sometimes he needed to be firm in the classroom. And, you know, as a social worker and a human services person, you know, I probably could be a little more firm, maybe, you know. And I learned so much and reminded about, she says in the book, Amoni, I've been making hard decisions since I was 14 years old when she got pregnant with her child. And that's the thing, our students come to us, whether they're 18 or 25 or 33, which is the average age of a student in our program, with a lot of life experience, and who have had to make a lot of difficult decisions. And yeah, that I don't want to patronize them or speak down to them. And it's a great reminder of what we teach our students, right? Meet the client where they are, meet the student where they are. The student is coming to me regardless of what age they are. They're at a community college, they've been through some stuff. I need to capitalize on that, help them fuel that into where they want to go. I've read the book twice because of this, and might probably read it the third time before I teach it in the fall. Just the way, there's so many different ways we can slice this book. So I was personally enriched, no doubt, but I've read all the author's books. I'm a big fan of her, but that's probably soapbox. Okay, I'm muting.
Okay, thank you. That helps me just hear it from an instructor standpoint and how you would take and personally grow from it to reuse it in the classroom. So thank you.
Can I just jump in really quickly as someone who is faculty, is not a teaching faculty, is still in the classroom with students and has to do kind of a public services aspect of my job. So all of us hear all the time that, you know, some of our students have so much going on in their lives. They might have things on their mind when you interact with them, and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, grain of salt. But then you forget about that grain of salt when you're dealing with a student. Whereas when you're reading this narrative, you get insight into what all exactly your student might have on their mind when you're talking to them. If they are tired or snappish or need to laugh at a time that possibly is not appropriate, there could be all of these other variables going on in their life, and to hear it as a narrative really makes it resonate. So
Yeah, I get that even with like when you're talking to a student about should they drop my class. And sometimes when you get into those conversations about all the other stuff going on, I realize my class is just a small part of what they're dealing with. And I need to see that in context. And that really helps me with either to help address the anxieties and the other stuff going on, or to say, yeah, you know, cut your losses here and let's get you to counseling and work on those other things so you can come back to my class later.
So all that to say, we're very excited. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for students and for, you know, for any faculty who want to read it and who want to integrate it in their class, or just use it as professional development and personal enrichment. I think it has a lot of value. I think, you know, we're getting close to 11 here, but I think, you know, the more that we can promote enthusiasm and engagement with this book organically within departments, I think that is going to be the best way. And I think it's going to be a recipe for hopefully making this something that we can repeat year after year. You know, because that's the goal. A lot of the, you know, the colleges that have common reads that we're sort of emulating in this is they do this on an annual basis. But I think you know, each department and each sort of each class is going to be different, is going to be able to access different things from the book. And so, you know, for all of you who are working with the book and thinking about, doing something with it in your own areas. I think the more that, people can just go out to their own areas and think about how it might apply to you. Because, all of us who are on the selection committee, I mean, we have our own departments and our own insights into that, but we're not necessarily going to know or be able to prescribe how it would be useful in another area. But it might really be very useful in a way that, some of us might not have thought of. So just take that as you will. Thank you all so much for your attendance today. And I really want to thank especially Crystal and Laurie and Michelle for their time and efforts in being here. And Lynn and Mary, thank you so much also for jumping in with your experiences with the book as well. And everyone, your contributions were wonderful. So if there are any additional questions, feel free to jump in, but I think we're at our time. I will say we have another PD, virtual PD scheduled in 2 weeks on the 25th, and that will be more specifically about using it in the classroom. So if you would like to participate in that, or if you know of anyone in your area who would like to, please pass this on to them. And if you would, you can sign up in PD for me currently, and hope that you'll do that. So thank you everyone so much.